Welcome to my YouTube channel and to my train room. For this week's project, I'm going to paint a batch of HO scale people to populate my model railroad. Now, some people shy away from this aspect of the hobby, thinking that it's too difficult, but really it's not. It needs a few techniques different from most other painting projects. Now, there are already many tutorials out there on YouTube and other platforms showing how to paint miniature people. I'm just going to show you a few techniques that work for me and make the job a lot simpler. Now, before I turn the camera around, I'll just let you into a little secret. I had a false start on this batch. The paints that I was previously using had all dried out. I tried to salvage them, but it was not very successful. And I tried a different brand of paint which really didn't work very well. So it was back to square one. You may notice some disjoints in the video, but not to worry, I ended up with a nice big batch of miniature people. So let me turn the camera around and show you how I do this. Now, before we can get the paints out, we need to do a little bit of preparation. I start by cleaning up any flash and parting lines and then gluing them to scraps of wood. I'm using this crafter's pick. It's not a particularly strong glue, but it's strong enough for my purposes. I don't want to get them so firmly bonded to the plank that I can't get them off without damage. They just need to be strong enough to avoid getting knocked over with the paintbrush. Now, some of them I've found have holes in them that need to be filled, and for that I've just used this Tamiya putty. It's very easy to use. Just put it on, leave it for a few minutes, and then scrape off the excess. Most of these figures came from the Model Power bulk packs. A few came from China. They're all inexpensive, a few cents each, as opposed to over $1 each for pre-painted figures. Now, once the figures are glued to the boards, the next thing to do is to spray them with a primer, and any light colour will work. I'm going to use this light 10 camouflage paint, which sticks well to plastic and gives it a good tooth for further coats. So let me go away and do that, and I'll be right back. Well, I did have one false start with this project. I found that all of my Reaper paints had dried out. I tried putting water in them, and I was able to salvage a few of them, including the flesh tone, but the vast majority I've thrown out already. And that led me to attempt to use my cheap Walmart paints for this project, and really it just didn't work. They don't cover this plastic very well. So I made the decision to buy a new set of paints, and here they are. The Mega Paint Set by Army Painter. It's 50 of the most common colours formulated for painting miniatures. Now, at this point it may seem like the first step to do is to paint in all the flesh tones, but I've actually found that there's a very important step prior to that, and that is for the bottoms of skirts and jackets to black in all the areas that should be in shadow. If that's not done, the finished figure will always look like crap. So I'm going to start by getting a drop of black paint. This doesn't have to be particularly neat, since it's basically just filling in the shadow, and then I'm going to come back and start blocking in colours. Down between this guy's leg and his briefcase is another good place to fill in with black, because that will always be in shadow. And under the arms too. In my days of painting D&D miniatures, I used to shade every shadow, highlight every crease in the clothing, and even paint facial figures. But those miniatures were slightly larger. They were usually better sculpted, and my eyes were better then. Now, with all the shadows painted in black and all the flesh tones blocked in, it's time to start filling in colours. Now, I like to have a lot of figures to work on at once, and then do all of one colour before moving on to another one. Well, I've been working on these figures for an evening now, and they're gradually coming along. My technique is to take a colour and then paint articles of clothing on a few different figures with that one colour before putting it away and then working on a different colour. A good first colour to go with is white, because a lot of shirts are white and you generally need to start with the lower layers of clothing and end up with the overcoats. Towards the end I'll be more browns and greys, because most coats tend to be in those colours, and then when I've got a few figures that are otherwise done, that's when I come back and do the shoes and the hair. These 3 palettes are all finished now. I'm not putting in anywhere near as much detail as I used to when I was painting miniatures for Dungeons and Dragons, but then painting the miniatures was a hobby in itself. Here I'm trying to build a model railroad, and I can't afford to spend several hours on one miniature. I want to spend several minutes. On the other hand, I don't want to make it look like I only spent a few seconds on them, and many of the pre-painted figures that you can buy look like that to me. Well, I had a second painting session last night. I've now got 6 sticks completely finished for 30 out of the 50. 4 more that I'm still working on. What I tend to do when I realise that a stick is nearly finished, I concentrate on getting it done so that I can get it off the workbench. All of these seem to have one figure that has barely started and several that are nearly done, so it should only be a couple more hours and then this batch will be finished. So let me continue and I will be right back. Well, I've just had another painting session, a couple of hours, and all 50 figures are now done. I think it took me about 10 or 11 hours from start to finish, so I'm doing somewhere in the between 4 and 5 per hour, which I think is a reasonable target. A batch of 50 seemed like a big task, but now I have enough figures to populate an entire town. Unlike my Dungeons and Dragons miniatures, none of these are ever going to win a painting contest, but that's okay. I'm not trying to paint a couple of figures, I'm trying to build a model railroad. So I'm going to call this project done. And if anyone has any questions, please just send a comment below, and I'll do my best to answer your queries. Well, that's all for this week. I hope you learned something useful in the last few minutes, or in the very least that I entertained you in some way. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again next week. Bye for now.